Josh and I were sitting on the bench, the sky shifting from gold to pink as the day faded. Josh wasn't talking much, which wasn't unusual, but something about today felt heavier. Before I could ask him what was on his mind, I noticed a woman walking toward us, her steps slow and unsteady. As she got closer, Josh tensed up beside me. He muttered under his breath, "Aisha?" His whole vibe changed in an instant. Aisha's face lit up when she spotted him. "Josh! Wow, it's been a minute." Her voice was shaky, like she was trying too hard to sound upbeat. I could tell she was high on something. I didn't say anything, just watched the scene unfold, feeling the tension roll off Josh in waves. She swayed a bit as she came closer. "Who's your friend?" she asked, her eyes briefly landing on me. "Mezia," I said, but I kept my tone flat. I wasn't sure where this was going, but it didn't feel right. "Nice to meet you," Aisha replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She turned back to Josh. "You remember the old days, don't you? We used to have some good times. You, me. Everything was simpler back then." Josh shifted on the bench, clearly uncomfortable. "That was a long time ago, Aisha. Can you please go? You're embarrassing me," he said, keeping his voice low. He wasn't looking at her, more like through her, like he didn't want to acknowledge she was even there. Aisha's laugh was bitter. A little cringe, to be honest. "Yeah, well, look at me now, begging for change at stoplights just to get by. Some days I even have to sell myself to keep from starving. All thanks to you, Josh." I could feel Josh stiffen beside me, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked like he was doing everything he could to stay calm, but the anger was building. Aisha wasn't done. She took a step closer, her voice filled with venom. "You left me, Josh. When things got rough, you walked away and you always use bitch about how everyone abandoned you. And now look at me. You're partly to blame for this mess. I've had to do things you can't even imagine to survive." She paused, her eyes wild with anger, desperation, and something deeper, pain. "Do you know what it's like to stand at a stoplight, holding out your hand like a beggar? Or worse, selling your body just to get by?" Josh's jaw tightened, but he still didn't say anything. I could see him trying to hold it together, but I knew it was only a matter of time before he snapped. "You think you're better than me now?" Aisha spat. "Look at you, sitting here with your new friend, acting like you've got your life all figured out. Meanwhile, I'm out here doing whatever it takes to survive. You left me behind, and now I'm paying the price for it." That was it. Something inside Josh broke. He stood up, his eyes blazing with fury. "How dare you?" he said, his voice shaking with anger. "How can you fucking blame me for the choices you made? I was a kid, Aisha, a damn kid. You can't put that on me." Aisha didn't back down. "Oh, but I can. You think I wanted this life? You think I wanted to end up like this? You were supposed to have my back, Josh. We were supposed to look out for each other." Josh's anger boiled over. Before I could even process what was happening, he slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the park, leaving an awful silence in its wake. Aisha stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. She brought a hand up to her cheek, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You think this is my fault?" Josh yelled, his voice filled with pain. "I was a kid when we met. I couldn't save you. I couldn't even save myself half the time. You want to blame me for where you are now? Fine, blame me. But don't you dare say I abandoned you. I tried to help. I tried, and you know it." The air felt thick between us, like the world had paused in that moment. Aisha didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost defeated. "You hit me," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Josh's breathing was heavy, his fists still clenched, but I could see the regret starting to creep into his eyes. He looked away, ashamed. Aisha, just go, he said, his voice raw. Please. Aisha stared at him for a moment, her expression hardening again. She wiped at her cheek and gave a bitter laugh. Fine, Josh, I'll go, but don't think for a second you're innocent in all this. You're just as lost as I am. She turned and walked away, her steps uneven, disappearing down the path without looking back. I didn't say anything for a while. I wasn't sure what to say. The silence between Josh and me was thick, but it wasn't comfortable this time. It was heavy, filled with things left unsaid. Josh finally sat back down next to me, his head in his hands. I didn't mean to hit her, he whispered, his voice filled with guilt. I know, I said softly, resting a hand on his shoulder. I didn't know what else to do. This whole thing was too messy for words. We sat there as the darkness crept in, both of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to make sense of what just happened.